Good evening and welcome to this week's edition of Behind the Headlines, and in this programme tonight we'll be discussing Dr. Jordan Peterson's address to Congress, warning Western civilization that we face a dark dystopian future, and he uses the example of China and China's mass surveillance program combined with its social credit system, and how a technology is leading to greater authoritarianism in the hands of the state and corporations with an ideological agenda. This all combined and powered by the power of artificial intelligence. And so this program will be asking, is this the mark of the beast? Is this the economic system, digital system, that we won't be able to buy or sell unless we have the mark of the beast mentioned in the chapter 13 of Revelation? Reagan, it's great that you can join us for a revisited topic as we discuss how modern technology is essentially leading us to the system of the beast, in which the Antichrist uses this economic and digital system to implement what is known as the mark of the beast, which is of course 666.
Well, you know, it's really phenomenal, Simon, that we're able to sit and have another program which really touches on quite a few of the programs we've done over the years, unintentionally, but we were talking about this several years ago. We had one of our most viewed Behind the Headlines asked the question, is China developing the mark of the beast? We had a very viewed program during, I think it was 2021, about Canadian truckers and how they were
2022.
Was that 2022? Okay, so you always forget how long this madness extended. But the extreme state control going on in Canada, freezing people's bank accounts because they were not checking all of the boxes of Canada's ideological drive during the COVID season. And you know, we've discussed also some of the dangers of AI and various infrastructures that are in place, really building the framework and foundation for society and an economy and a world that looks very, very much like what we see depicted in Revelation in regards to those days, the man of lawlessness, the mark of the beast, and that beast system.
Also, we have this one as well. A lot of the tonight's discussion as well will touch upon a lot of kind of science fiction. A lot of the films that were made in the 90s and the 2000s, Terminator, Minority Report, are showing this is the future that awaits us, according to Dr. Jordan Peterson and his address to Congress. So we see him there. So he's written his the title of his address to Congress was "Fascist Totalitarian Future Awaits Us." He also then uses the direction, talks about the direction that modern technology is taking us, looking at China's mass surveillance program. That's over 700 million cameras in China, combined with its social credit system, which awards those who adhere to China's state control, but those who decide to maybe question some of the policies by the Chinese authorities find themselves left in poverty. They are not able to, they live in the poorer housing conditions, they are not able to fly, they're not able to travel, and of course this is also used against the Uyghurs, in the Muslim minorities in China as well, and also seeing that this technology is also used to persecute the underground church in China. We see also now the danger now that governments and corporations are using this technology to outlaw hate speech, but this is dangerously defined by those in power. And it's those who set the agenda, i.e. the state and corporations, that set the digital agenda of our future. And of course, we know that we are living in this digital new age. And I think the 2020s have really birthed this technology, which I believe is actually the infrastructure for the Antichrist being built today, with a total power and total control over our lives.
It's good to go ahead and refresh our memory of what the Bible text itself says there in Revelation chapter 13 from verses 11 through to 18. And we'll have it there for you on the screen. Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon. And he exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence. and causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. He performs great signs, so that even he makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. And he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which he was granted to do in the sight of the first beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast who was wounded by the sword and lived. He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666.
I think it's important to stress now that any viewer that's unsure, we are not living in the tribulation period. The mark of the beast is not imminent, because the Antichrist is not on the world stage. He's not reigning as the supreme leader of the world or the one world president, and we are not halfway through what the Bible describes as the tribulation period. This is the great tribulation period, the last 3.5 years of the book of Revelation. But what is so interesting, firstly, it talks about his assassination, that the Antichrist is assassinated, he comes to life again, almost reflecting that of Jesus dying and then rising again, because he's Satan's counterfeit. But also the beast is the Antichrist, but it's also the system, the political, the economic power system behind Satan's man, the Antichrist. Now, what's so interesting is when we unpack further in this program the advances of modern technology and the direction it's going in, it shows that anyone who really does not follow the ideological viewpoints of either the state or corporations in terms of this militant secular humanism, this progressive liberal agenda, will find themselves cut off from the economic system, that they won't be able to buy or sell unless they're in the system. So we're seeing how we are moving so much towards this advancement in technology, that we're heading towards what the Bible talks about, and it talks about, and this is the vision that God gave John on the island of Patmos 2,000 years ago, a day and age where you could not buy or sell unless you had the mark of the beast. So we've had historians, we've had Bible prophecy experts really arguing, how could this possibly be? How could you live in an age where you cannot buy or sell, and how then you will be totally cut off from society? You will be digitally cut off, which means that you won't even actually exist. And now we see the technology with the moves towards a cashless society, a central bank digital currency, powered and generated by AI technology, artificial intelligence, that we are heading in this direction. And the Lord, even though he's not a born-again Christian, this is Dr. Jordan Peterson, he's a great conservative social commentator, is really warning Western civilization that we face a dark dystopian future, and that we're heading for totalitarianism if, for example, the checks and balances are not put in place soon as how technology will be used in order to enslave us.
According to the Daily Signal, this famed psychologist and author Jordan Peterson has warned Congress, even as recently as Thursday, the 7th of March of 2024, about a potential superstate in which collusion between government and corporations may be eliminating the private sphere. Peterson was a witness Thursday in a hearing held by a special House panel on government weaponization that focused on the Biden administration's working with large banks to monitor private financial data, and in some cases, to debank Americans.
And we've had this with Nigel Farage as well, as a kind of British example of this.
And not just with Nigel Farage, multitude, especially of churches, have been unilaterally debanked. Discovered even after our conversation on Farage that my own brother's church found itself without a bank account. Just pulled the plug on these things. They have,
and you can't exist now without a bank account in today's world. Economically, you're cut off.
So there are ways at the moment people can say, yeah, but Farage is able to get another account eventually. Yeah, eventually, but the issue is, shouldn't have happened in the first place. So we're still at a stage where there's enough pushback and there's enough protest that the banks and other corporations are not able to force through all of their agendas or desires in this, but they're seeking to do just that. And eventually it gets to a point of saturation and fatigue, and people just throw their hands up.
But there's also another aspect to this one as well, is that we are moving away from our kind of capitalist system, if we've not moved away from that already.
Right.
So banks' primary purpose before was profit, but now it's not. They are in league with the state in order to pursue a liberal progressive agenda, and if you don't fit that liberal progressive viewpoint represented by the banks and the corporations now, as we're seeing they've gone incredibly woke, then you can be cut off. Your bank account be essentially frozen if you speak out on these issues, on biblical issues today. Carry on regarding this.
There was a total of 5 witnesses at this event, this special hearing, including Peterson appearing before the House Judiciary Select Subcommittee on Weaponization of the Federal Government. Peterson and others testified about cases in which banks refused to do business with a Christian charity and other conservative-leaning organizations as a result of government pressure. They also noted instances in which the FBI used bank records to monitor gun purchases. During the hearing, Subcommittee Chairman Jim Jordan, a Republican of Ohio, asked Dr. Peterson, do you think they are just going to stop with conservatives? Peterson responded that Americans' concerns should be about ever-expanding control rather than a specific political party. The danger posed by this increasing ability of governments and large corporations to collude threatens everyone's freedom equally, Peterson testified. It could well be at the moment, and I think this is the point Republicans here are trying to make, is that the people in the sites of that collusion tend to have more conservative leanings, but that will shift in a moment whenever the political tides shift. A full extract of Dr. Jordan Peterson's address to the U.S. Congress has been published by the Daily Telegraph under the headline, "Fascist Totalitarian Future Awaits Us. My testimony to Congress, the dystopia that Justin Trudeau's Canada and Xi Jinping's China are building will one day enslave humanity."
So let's have a look at an extract of Dr. Jordan Peterson's address to Congress, warning about the dangers of uncontrolled technology, and if we incorporate China's mass surveillance program is a threat to Western civilization.
I'm here to talk about the already extant and expanding collusion of government and corporation in restricting the individual freedom and autonomy upon which the productive, generous, and stable psyche, economy, and state are themselves necessarily founded. I'll begin my comments, therefore, in the most general terms to shed light on the mounting problem. There are now 700 million CCTVs in China under the rule of the Communist Party. The system to which those electronic eyes are attached is the most complete state apparatus of surveillance yet imagined, with the ability not only to recognize faces at a distance, but gait itself when facial features are hidden or obscured. Such capability can and will soon be augmented to the point where the movement of eyes themselves, monitored by high-resolution and intelligent cameras, will soon be sufficient to identify any aware and active party. The demented, naive, and prideful engineers who so enthusiastically helped build this system call it Skynet, after the rogue and all-seeing technology that took such a dreadfully wrong turn in the famous science fiction movie Terminator series, featuring artificially intelligent robot intelligences hell-bent on protecting themselves by destroying humanity. The name also references a well-known Chinese phrase describing the reach of the divine itself. The net of heaven is vast, yet it misses Nothing.
Well, there's more I'm sure that you can find from Dr. Peterson's statement that's there, but some truly chilling commentary that he's provided. Now, Simon, there are 700 million CCTV cameras in communist China. And these electronic eyes essentially are attached to the most complete state apparatus of surveillance yet imagined. It far surpasses what we have here even at the moment. It's not only able to recognize faces at distance, but the individual's gait, how they walk, when facial features are hidden or obscured, sunglasses can read things, the eyes, and identify a person even in that sort of obscured state. Such capability can and soon will be augmented to the point where the movements of eyes themselves, monitored by intelligent cameras, will be sufficient to identify any active party.
And this is the big change since the last time we did a program on this, I think going back to sometime in, is it 2021, is that technology is advanced now. So what we're seeing now, as you said, now these electronic eyes now can identify people by their eyes. And that is a huge technological change from a couple of years ago in terms of China's mass surveillance program. I mean, if you consider that there are, is it 1.4 billion people in China, and the Chinese state, which is a totalitarian state, literally can control and monitor the lives of over 1 billion people, is a scary prospect for the West, because essentially we know that our governments would like to do away with kind of democracy in the West, and that the freedoms that we've had that have been enshrined in our democracy and our democratic institutions are no guarantee that they'll be there in the future. That's why each generation has to fight for them, otherwise we lose them. But the danger is now that this uncontrolled surveillance, this uncontrolled digital world that we're living in, can give the power of the state and corporations total control and access of our lives. And this is what's very, very scary, is the fact that every movement we can make can be monitored by China's incredible CCTV cameras and operations. Ian Duncan Smith, as you know, the former leader of the Conservative Party, wrote an interesting article in the Daily Telegraph back on the 2nd of July last year in 2023. He says that the world leader in artificial intelligence, China, already uses the technology in a range of systems, including the surveillance of minority groups such as the Uyghurs, Muslims in Xinjiang. Here, data from security cameras, mobile signal trackers, and people's spending habits are passed through a sophisticated AI software to determine their risks and profiles. If they are caught in the dragnet, the consequences can be severe. But when it's combined with genomics surveillance, the AI potential becomes truly dystopian. So in other words, the Chinese regime is testing everyone's DNA and genes in order to calculate, are they a threat to the Chinese authorities? What are their weaknesses? What are their genetic defects? And so therefore they can have even greater control of the population. He goes on to say that under the Made in China 2025 strategy, genomics, like AI, is classified as a priority industrial for global domination by the Chinese Communist Party. When considered alongside a domestic law that compels all Chinese firms to assist and cooperate with the state intelligence work, it should be of great concern that the world's biggest genomics firm is the Beijing Genomics Institute. He says BGI is the largest company you have probably never heard of. It is reportedly collaborating on genetic research programs designed to enhance soldiers' performance, and we've done a program on this one as well, at high altitude, while operating as the country's national gene bank, with investigations into the origins of COVID-19 outbreak and the extent of China's research.
It's very important that we take this very seriously. Possessing someone's genomic data equates to knowing everything about them. It reveals their ancestry, probable height, eye and hair color, susceptibility to certain diseases, and appropriate drug reactions, even aspects of their characters such as addictive tendencies. The implications of the CCP harnessing this information and applying AI technology to it are staggering. Extrapolating the scenario to population level and combining bulk DNA data with sophisticated AI analysis, China could predict which countries would require specific drugs years in advance, allowing them to control supply chains and gain significant strategic leverage over international competitors. The demented, naive engineers who are so enthusiastically helping build this system call it Skynet, after the rogue and all-seeing technology that takes such a dreadfully wrong turn in the science fiction Terminator series, where artificially intelligent robot minds hell-bent on protecting themselves end up destroying humanity as a consequence. The name also references a well-known Chinese phrase describing the reach of the divine itself. The net of heaven is vast, yet it misses nothing, which aptly describes the capabilities of the new state apparatus.
So let's have a look at this excellent CBN News report that's a couple of years old, entitled China's Play for a Global Digital Dictatorship That Could Come to the West.
In 2013, China's President Xi Jinping said that whoever controls data has the upper hand. Ever since, Xi has been on a technological quest to build what some call a blueprint for a digital dictatorship. It would not only allow China's communist government to control huge volumes of data on its own citizens, but also of those around the world. Dustin Carmack worked as chief of staff for the director of national intelligence.
You're talking, vast amounts of data. They are running between both either covert or overt, cyber attacks and other realms. They are sucking up massive amounts of data around the globe that could have nefarious purposes in the long run.
China has more than 415 million surveillance cameras deployed throughout the country, making its population by far the world's most watched. And now Beijing is using digital currency, social security cards, social credit systems, and online interactions to keep an even closer eye on its citizens.
It is a massive dragnet based on artificial intelligence, facial recognition, voice recognition. These are all novel technologies that the Chinese Communist Party is deploying against its people.
Jeffrey Kane, author of the new book, The Perfect Police State, an undercover odyssey into China's terrifying surveillance dystopia of the future, says the regime first tested this type of surveillance several years ago to monitor Uyghurs, an ethnic Muslim group living in the western part of the country.
It's a place where everything they do from morning to night, from the moment that they eat breakfast or go to the market or go to work, everything is monitored by their smartphones, by government cameras everywhere. There are millions of government cameras in this region, and nothing is private, nothing is secret. Your entire life is exposed.
Kane says his investigation found that those reams of data are fed to a massive police database, and with the help of artificial intelligence, attempts to predict whether or not someone will commit a crime in the future.
But the thing is that the system has gotten out of control because, so I looked at a list of reasons that people can be detained for these pre-crimes. And it could be something as simple as, they bought a tent suddenly, or they stopped smoking suddenly. They change their behavior in ways that the system finds odd. And then so it nudges the police. It sends the police a little, on the app, a nudge to, go to this person's house, to their work, to check them out, maybe interrogate them a little bit. And if the situation calls for it, take them away to one of many hundreds of concentration camps.
China is accused of committing genocide against the Uyghurs by holding more than 1 million of them in what Beijing calls re-education camps. The Associated Press gaining exclusive access to one such detention center this summer that allegedly had room enough to hold more than 10,000 prisoners.
When we talk about genocide, it's not just about taking lives, which there's evidence to suggest that's occurring too, but it's to erase a population, an ethnic group, and that's what they're after.
Sophie Richardson with Human Rights Watch says President Xi also wants China to be the global leader in exporting its authoritarian surveillance tech to other like-minded regimes.
So when they've got the kinds of tools that allow them, for example, to track their critics every movement and control their access, for example, to money or even to buying plane or train tickets, it can make a state exponentially more powerful.
New research from Oxford University and Berlin's Humboldt University uncovered some 1,800 active Chinese surveillance devices across 72 countries, including Venezuela, Kenya, Philippines, and Oman.
China is now using their influence, their money, their technology to facilitate the repression of minorities and individuals in other countries.
China has also deployed censorship devices in 17 other countries, among them Turkey, Cuba, Egypt, and Pakistan, where news and media websites are blocked.
I think the overall effect is to use technology to engineer a very particular kind of dissent-free society, and that's a very frightening concept.
China used these and other tactics to suppress protesters in Hong Kong, then came to Cuba's aid in July by cutting communications after tens of thousands took to the streets protesting the regime.
That type of technology being used to throttle internet traffic flows, or at times in Cuba actually turn off the internet, especially in the early days of some of the protests down there.
Meanwhile, new research shows that technology made by 7 American companies, including IBM, Microsoft, and Oracle, are facilitating China's surveillance of Uyghur Muslims with little to no consequences.
I think that a lot of American companies have been caught with their pants down, frankly, because they spent the past 2 decades warming up to China, looking for market and business opportunities, profit opportunities, and now they've realized that they're making a deal with the devil.
A deal that is handing China a treasure trove of data in its quest for global information superiority and digital control over its citizens and those around the world.
Well, we're very grateful, as always, to our good friends at CBN for their incisive reporting there. We know that this is something they've been keeping an eye on for a while, just as we have. China's social credit system basically awards its involuntary participants with a score indicating their compliance with the diktats of the party, allowing for full control over access to everything they possess electronically. Most ominously, their savings and access to travel, including as more electronic gates appear, walking. If you are Chinese or even just a visitor, if your social credit score falls beyond an arbitrary minimum, your access to the world can be reduced to 0. This allows you to be shut out of all activities that can be virtualized: driving, shopping, working, eating, finding shelter, even fraternizing with friends and family, as merely being in the presence of someone with a low social credit score means that your own score can be lowered. Well, that's you and I, Simon, are both lowering our score just in this very moment.
No, but it's interesting, isn't it? We started the program talking about talking through and reading out Revelation chapter 13, and we're talking about the mark of the beast, that no one will be able to buy or sell in the future unless they have the mark of the beast, and this is the halfway point of the tribulation period. And we see here, for example, that the Chinese, through using the social credit system, are already cutting people off from the economic system. So essentially, if you do not adhere to the views of the state in China, you find yourselves having problems driving, because you won't be able to have a digital ID, you won't be able to have a passport, you won't be able to fly, you won't be able to buy or eat because you won't be able to shop. You are then finding you can't have a home because you can't afford to do that because you're not in the system. And effectively, it's a means of freezing you out of society. And it's exactly the same tactics that the Antichrist will deploy for those who don't worship him in the image of the beast. And so therefore, people are then told, you receive the mark of the beast. If you don't receive the mark of the beast, then it will cost you your life. And so we have to emphasize again that this hasn't happened yet. This happens during the tribulation period, and there's no way, if you read 1 Thessalonians and 2 Thessalonians, as Paul mentioned, we are not in that time yet. This is for a future period. We don't know how far we are away from it, but what we see is that our technology is rapidly going in that direction.
Yeah, and to clarify, I think it's always very important because I come across a lot of hand-wringing over this particular issue. You cannot be tricked into taking the mark of the beast. You cannot be an unwitting partaker in the mark of the beast. This is something that you become a part of this system. You launch yourself into it willingly, maybe not recognizing it or not knowing it in the negative way as the mark of the beast with its inherent negative connotations, but it's clearly something that everyone consciously undertakes and becomes a part of for the sake of status at the expense of principles.
Yeah.
And particularly those principles that are involved in following our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. It is an active, practical abandonment of truth, the truth that's found in Jesus for the sake of that man of lawlessness.
And it's also important to note, according to Scripture, that those who receive the mark of the beast are kind of judged for eternal damnation. If you receive the mark of the beast, maybe someone might be watching this program in the future during the tribulation period, if YouTube's still up, or our website is still up, then I think what you could find is that those who receive the mark of the beast their salvation is over. There is no chance for you anymore. This is why it's an imperative that we're doing this program today, is a warning and a wake-up call to show the direction that technology is actually leading us into this darkest period of world history that is approaching. Now, according to Dr. Jordan Peterson, he says, why is any of this relevant to people in the West? And this is his address to Congress last week. He says this: because the technology that the Chinese Communist Party employs is an extension of Western technology. Because we already until recently fell prey of the terrible temptation of lockdowns employed by the state in the face of a hypothetical crisis. He says, because we are walking step by step in the same direction, partly because of the hypothetical convenience of universal and automatic recognition of identity, partly because any problem whatsoever now confronts us can easily be used to justify the increasing reach of security and the nanny state. He goes on to say, we all now have doppelgangers. Now, I had to look the word doppelgangers up. It means that it's a double identity. So we have our own identity here, but we also have our own digital identity. So it's our virtual identity, our kind of bank details, our passports. Everything that tells everything about us online is this double gangers. He also then he says we all live so much in the virtual world thanks to our purchasing habits and modes of electronically mediated communication that our very selves have become reducible to a frightening degree as a mere data, the modern equivalent of our footprint, with that same data making up an image of our identity. This identity can, as in increasingly being bought and sold by invisible corporate brokers that use it to sell what we so desperately and carelessly and conveniently want. But can you also be used to track, monitor and punish everything you do?
Behavioral scientists facilitate this process with their reprehensible nudging, the practice of pushing people in a given ideologically determined direction by manipulating invisible incentives behind the scenes. Corporations track purchasing decisions, developing algorithms that with increasing accuracy track our patterns of intention and action, allowing for the prediction of what might next be most enticing. Doing so not only to offer us what we want, but to determine and shape what we need. Governments can and are colluding with these corporate agents to develop a picture not only of our actions, but of our thoughts and words so that deviation from the desired end can be mapped, rewarded, and punished. The development of such a digital identity and currency is nothing more than the likely end consequence of such inclinations, and the combination of both will facilitate the development of a surveillance state, the scope of which optimistic pessimists of totalitarianism such as George Orwell could scarcely imagine. I mean, this is the sort of stuff that I don't know if you ever saw the documentary The Social Experiment, talking about advertising on social media giants and how they with cookies and everything they harvest our personal information. It's fed into this AI algorithm that then gets to the point where it can predict to a fairly significantly accurate degree our thoughts, our conversation patterns, our interests, our wants, to market initially. The idea is that it then markets to us with adverts things that are interesting to us, things that we're likely to be drawn in by, and it then creates this dopamine effect as well, wherein we keep going back. The more we go back to social media, the more it sells us, and the more it hones and in some way clones an artificial version of ourselves.
Yep. What's that? A doppelganger.
Doppelganger. Yeah.
Doppelganger. Yeah. I have to use these new tech words. Doppelganger.
Artificial doppelganger that's there. It's basically it manufactures through whether it's photos and through conversations, comments, clicks, things that you watch online, even through our devices that listen, that hear various things, Alexa, all that sort of stuff that Amazon produces. It builds this picture, and it's like a digital image, a digital you, that it can almost read its mind. Think about it, Simon. Have you ever had a conversation, maybe even with me, about going off to, we'll predict it right now, Croatia or something, Dubrovnik, whatever, and then maybe you're scrolling through the phone and you suddenly see something from lastminute.com about flights to Dubrovnik. Or, this has happened multiple occasions where I've seen something for the first time and asked a question about it to someone, and then later on I see it again, not from someone else or in public, but on my phone on an advert. Why is that? Because these devices can hear, they can listen, yes, but also they can be fairly accurate judges of our day-to-day experience.
This is harmless at the moment.
It is.
But we know that, for example, this will be used in the future to monitor what we say.
What's insidious?
Our political actions, our kind of our spiritual beliefs. And therefore we can all be monitored everywhere. And I suppose the ultimate plan of Satan is what he's always wanted to be, and that's omnipresent. And of course, with this modern technology, with cameras everywhere, cameras in front of you, cameras on our phones here, cameras on the iPad, it just shows you how much we are now comfortable with cameras. And that everyone is used to cameras, and yet what it does, it gives the person who's in control of the cameras that omnipresent ability to see everything everywhere at the time, essentially to be God. That's essentially what we're seeing here with this. But also, Dr. Jordan Peterson makes some very interesting points, and I want to draw this out. He says the development of such a digital identity, at the moment it's only China that has this digital identity that I'm fully aware of. So it means that this would include your passport, this would include a doctor's certificates, your qualifications, all your medical history, your driver license will all appear on this digital ID that carries all the information about you, so the authorities can access this at a tap of a button. We also see, for example, it talks about a digital currency, and nothing more than the likely consequences such inclinations and the combination of both will facilitate and development of a surveillance state, the scope which optimistic pessimists of totalitarianism, such as George Orwell, could scarcely imagine. So essentially, the game changer is a cashless society. As soon as governments in the West implement a digital currency and a central bank digital currency, this is the game changer. This is the day that our freedom ends and the state has total control of our resources. So they will be able to monitor everything we do with our money. So we give money to ministries or that are helping to spread the gospel. We say this is against the state. we're going to close your bank accounts down. Whether you say something on social media defending Israel, this could be against the state, and so therefore they'll close your bank accounts. And it's a way of tracking everybody's movement under total control, together combined with this digital ID, and literally means we will then become frozen out of the system. So let's have a look at this warning and an excellent report put together by our friends at CBN titled, "Is a Digital Dollar Coming?" Some financial experts warn it could be an instrument of government control.
Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell told the House Financial Services Committee in March that the Fed had already begun testing a digital dollar.
So what we're doing is experimenting in kind of early stage experimentation. How would this work? Does it work? What's the best technology? What's the most efficient?
Just like paper dollars, a central bank digital currency, or CBDC, would be issued by the Federal Reserve. Those pushing for it say it would have several advantages over physical money. They say it could be used to fight inflation because the Fed would have more direct control over the money supply. It could speed up transaction payments and help fight money laundering.
The ability to track transactions has a couple of elements that are very attractive to economic policymakers. One is to know where people are spending their money. Another is to track taxes and prevent evasion and that sort of thing.
Backers say the U.S. needs a digital dollar if it wants to remain the world's reserve currency. Opponents warn that it could be a very effective instrument of government control. Physical money has been called one of the last bastions of privacy. Laws like the Bank Secrecy Act have already stripped away most of the privacy from bank accounts and financial transactions.
Banks have really a ton of power that people don't realize to shut down accounts, to freeze accounts, and to end up holding them for really any number of reasons.
Currency expert James Rickards says a digital currency would move America closer to a totalitarian state.
If I buy anything, the government doesn't know it. MasterCard kind of knows it, but even MasterCard uses product codes. So they don't say, you know, Jim bought a Snickers. It says Jim bought miscellaneous merchandise at a retail place. So the government doesn't know what you're doing. But with this new central bank digital currency, they will, because they maintain the ledger. So if I buy, you know, Ron DeSantis' new book, or I go to a Donald Trump rally, or whatever it may be, the government, using artificial intelligence and having that information, which they would, are able to profile you. They say, well, this guy kind of looks like a conservative and maybe he's MAGA. And then you've got a target on your back.
Last year, a Canadian court froze millions of dollars raised for truckers blocking roads to protest COVID-19 vaccine mandates. When the Pakistani government was faced with almost non-stop protest last year, it threatened to switch off the bank accounts of the protesters. A digital dollar could not only be switched off, the Fed would be able to force negative interest rates on Americans if it wanted them to spend more, penalizing savers. Digital cash might also be an easy target for hackers. On the bank-to-bank level, a real-time payment system called FedNow is expected to begin in July. It's not a digital currency, but an upgrade to what some call our antiquated banking system.
FedNow service is an instant payments infrastructure that financial institutions can use to clear and settle payments instantly.
Large bank deposits will be expected to clear much faster than they do now. But when it comes to a digital dollar, Fed Chairman Powell has admitted he's not at all confident that Americans want it. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Again, thank you to our friends at CBN for that helpful report. Rapidly emerging new AI systems that we're talking about, Simon, do nothing but increase the danger of this super surveillance whose scope exceeds anything that mere humans can imagine. They could ensure that our attitudes, conduct, and personalities can be manipulated to the degree that we will not even be able to see a reality outside that which has been constructed by the superstate. The ultimate fascist collusion between gigantic, self-interested corporations and paranoid, security-obsessed, anti-human governments. We're already selling our souls to the superstate for the purposes of immediate gratification and convenience. while being enticed to do so by fear-mongering ideologues, guaranteeing to us the security which we so desperately and inherently crave.
Also, we see that Dr. Jordan Peterson talks about his nation, Canada, and gives that as an example. He says, in my country, Canada, the most egregious overreach of superstate occurred in the aftermath of the working class protests against, ironically, the state overreach during the COVID lockdowns, when our increasingly delusional and totalitarian federal government determined that it was appropriate to suspend the access of protesters and their supporters, however minor, to their own assets, in conclusion with Canada's big banks. And of course, this was the Freedom Convoy that took place in January, early days of January 2022. He says such an event did and should send a chill down the spines of anyone concerned with the maintenance of personal security, privacy and autonomy, signalling the increasing ability and willingness of the state and corporate agents to act in sync with regards to the data they now possess and means of control of their fingertips, and to punish their customers and civilians for their political views, however widespread those views might be. What views are deemed unacceptable will be precisely determined as those that oppose the interests of whomever is currently wielding the battle of power, left or right, corporate or governmental. It said it was recently determined in Canada that such a move was literally unconstitutional, but that has not stopped the overreach of the state. New legislation posed by the same government mandates the generation of a soon-to-be giant bureaucracy to monitor and to publish in an extrajudicial manner so-called crimes of hate, and be defined as any speech or act that the bureaucrats and corporations in charge of the definition themselves object to. Says the same legislation now even defines what might be regarded as pre-crime. If a court now judges that a Canadian civilian might perpetrate a so-called crime in the future, that person can be fitted with an electronic surveillance device, restricted his or her ability to move or communicate, all to monitor compliance with the dictates of the state. Hello, Tom Cruise, Minority Report, film 2002. So, I mean, essentially what we're seeing here is the superstate, the power of the state. And we know that, for example, that when we're living in times where our main economic system is capitalism, it means that there's less power to the state and more power to the individual. But this is a kind of Marxist communist system that places all the power in the hands of the state and takes away the individual responsibility and power of the individual in favor of the state. Now, we've seen this with totalitarian regimes such as the Soviet Union. The Nazis employed this. Everything was generated up by the state, and now we're living the same time where we're seeing the state overreach, state complete control of our lives. And of course, once we enter into that cashless society and a digital currency, this is total state control over our lives.
I'm reminded of a television series that ran for a few years. It was quite popular in the United States. Sounds exactly like this, called Person of Interest, wherein there's a computerized machine, an AI machine that predicts crimes. It predicts who's going to be a victim, who's going to be a perpetrator, and basically a team tries to work through things, but then it goes rogue. And it leads to massive consequences across the world. With the increasing ability to monitor not only the actual attention patterns and behaviors of citizens, but to predict those that are most likely, the persecution of such potential crime becomes ever more likely. If you have nothing to hide, you will have nothing to fear, will be the slogan commandeered by those most likely to turn to surveillance to protect and to control. What was the famous Soviet totalitarian joke attributed to Lavrentiy Beria, head of the secret police? Show me the man and I'll show you the crime. Those words were true enough in the time of Joseph Stalin's terror, and the police were secret enough then as well. But that's nothing compared to what we can and likely will produce now. A police so secret that we will not even be able to detect their comprehensive and subtle activity, monitoring crime so pervasive that everyone under the dictats of the system will have something to hide and much to fear.
That's how Dr. Jordan Peterson ended his speech, which was really powerful. So we can see today the dangers of modern technology, and it's those who control this technology have the power, as we see in China. And the agenda behind those who are using this new technology, will it benefit mankind, or will this technology effectively enslave us? Because that's where we're heading, and it's all based on this consumption of convenience. This will make your life easier. You'll want a digital currency because it means that you won't have to carry around cash in your hands. You won't, why get your hands dirty with cash, going to a cash machine, getting money out and spending money that way, when you can just use your card and it will pay for it automatically. So a lot of this is convenience. We're seeing now, give you a little test at home. See how many ATM machines or cash machines you can actually see in your town and count them, because what we're seeing now is that our banks are taking away cash as a preparation to move us to a digital currency and a cashless society.
Yeah, there's severe consequences that we're going to be seeing more and more. There's also the rise of cryptocurrencies, and there's some debate.
They want to destroy cryptocurrencies because they have no control. This is why they want to bring about. So they want a digital currency controlled by a central bank digital currency. So effectively, there will only be one bank now. There won't be lots of banks. There will only be one bank, and that'll be the state bank. In which, if we want a mortgage to buy a house, then that has to be approved then by the state. The state then looks at your social media feeds, your social credit scores, and say, well, you've been a good citizen. Yeah, we'll give you a mortgage for your house. We'll pay you this sort of money on a universal salary that everyone's paid the same. And then we're all controlled by the state, where our democratic freedom has gone. Our ability then to share the gospel will then mean that our lives are in danger. And the freedom and liberties that we've enjoyed in the West for centuries because of the impact of Christianity's had on Britain, Europe, and in North America will be a thing of the past. And because there is no moral focus point, there's no moral reference points anymore. It's all I will do what's right in my own eyes, and this persuasive, secular, humanist, liberal agenda that penetrates everything will be the means that will actually persecute us, which is essentially the spirit of Antichrist. And it means that we can then be shut off from the economic system, that we won't be able to eat, we won't be able to work, all designed to enslave us through using modern technology, which effectively we can see that the mark of the beast or the Antichrist will deploy this technology in order to enslave humanity. If they can do it in China and enslave 1.4 billion people in China, then they can do this on a world scale.
We've talked in previous programs about the World Economic Forum and its proposals. That also fits in with this idea that has been presented, and some say it's not going to really be implemented, but it's been presented as something to implement. It's sometimes called Agenda 2030, wherein you will own nothing and you'll be happy, is what's been presented. So it's presented as something that's freeing and that's liberating, but the irony of so much of what our modern system and our modern world is calling freedom and liberty is actually the very thing, it's the very stuff that enslaves, it's the very stuff that subjugates. And yet the reality, some people out there, and I've encountered some interesting individuals who have said, yeah, but we should resist this, we should fight against it. And the reality, I would take a very different approach to that. The scriptures tell us we will have these times of trouble. It promises it's going to happen. I had someone say that, no, we should, the scriptures don't forbid us from fighting against the coming of this. We should, well, actually, Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. So if you're talking about anarchy-like violence, that's, I believe, out of the question here. What you need to resolve to do in your own heart and in your own mind is to stand firm in the truth of who Jesus Christ is. Walk in step with the Holy Spirit and in His power. Continue to live your life not as slaves, but as free in Jesus Christ. Continue to pray for our governments, for our authorities, as the scriptures call us to. We're entering days that are not dissimilar from those of the early church, and we're entering days of immense persecution, already being experienced by our brothers around the world. Pray for one another, continue to be faithful, be consistent, cling fast to God's truth, and in prayer, commit yourselves to God. He will lead you, He will guide you, He will direct your steps. The reality is the system of the beast is already, the foundations are already in play. We see the scriptures are clear in 1 John. He says the spirit of Antichrist is already come.
Yep.
And so we have to just get ready and make sure that we're looking to the one true Christ.
But isn't it extraordinary, though, that the prophecies given to the Apostle John on the island of Patmos 2,000 years ago are unfolding before our very eyes, that no one knew how the Antichrist would implement the mark of the beast, that no one would be able to buy or sell unless they received the mark of the beast. And we can see with the development and the rapid pace of technological change in this new digital era that we're living in, that this is now entirely possible. And isn't it important that we don't allow fear to reign in our hearts, but we also need to speak up against this very threat of losing our freedom. And that's why it's imperative that we pray for our governments. It's also why we need to be watchmen and women on the walls of Jerusalem. We need to read the scriptures to understand Bible prophecy, as we have that great hope in our heart that our redemption draws near and the return of Yeshua HaMashiach draws ever closer. So we want to thank you for watching this week's edition of Behind the Headlines.